Psychological therapies, action therapies, behavior and cognitive. Behavior therapy. Behavior therapy uses principles of classical and operant behavior to change behavior. They aim to change behavior through the use of learning techniques that people and animals use to learn any new responses. The undesired behavior is not seen as a symptom of anything else, but rather as the problem itself. Originally called behavior modification, the new adaptation of these techniques is applied behavioral analysis. This new term better explains the need to a function analysis of the behavior to be modified, which is then followed by the use of conditioning techniques to modify the behavior. Therapies based on classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is the learning of involuntary responses by pairing stimulus that causes a particular response with a new natural stimulus. Such therapies as systematic desensitization, aversion therapy, and exposure therapy. Systematic desensitization is when a therapist guides the client through a series of steps meant to reduce fear and anxiety, normally used to treat phobic disorders, which consists of a 3-step process. That process is when the client must learn to relax through deep muscle relaxation training. The client and the therapist make a list, beginning with the object or situation that produces the greatest amount of fear. Under the guidance of the therapist, the client begins at the first item on the list that causes minimal fear and looks at it, thinks about it, or confronts it while staying in a relaxed state. By putting the fear object with a new relaxation response that works, the client's fear is reduced and relieved. They continue to work down the list until the phobia is gone. Aversion therapy. Aversion therapy is a type of therapy designed to make a client give up an undesirable behavior by causing them to associate it with an aversive or unpleasant stimulus. Example would be the rapid smoking technique. For a client that wants to stop smoking, the therapist will allow them to smoke, but they must take a puff on a cigarette every 5 or 6 seconds. Such rapid smoking produces nausea and dizziness, which is an unpleasant effect. Exposure therapy is a behavioral technique that introduces the client to situations under carefully controlled conditions, which is related to their anxieties or fears. This therapy can be accomplished through many different methods, and it is meant to promote new learning, and here are a few ways. In vivo, or in life, the client is exposed to the actual anxiety-related stimulus. Imaginal. The client visualizes or imagines the stimulus. Virtual, which is when virtual reality is used. Examples of exposure therapy. A therapist is working with a client that has a fear of spiders or arachnophobia. They would first ask the client to picture a spider in their mind. This might lead to several sessions where the therapist asks them to picture more intense images while teaching them coping skills and providing support. Once the anxiety is reduced, they may start to progress to real-life exposure. The therapist might place a contained spider in a room away from the client and move up to placing it in the client's hand. Exposure methods can be introduced a feared stimulus gradually or suddenly. Gradual, or graded, involves the client and therapist developing a fear hierarchy as a systematic desensitization. If the exposure is rapid and intense, it begins with the most feared event and is called flooding. Flooding gets rid of the conditioned fear response by preventing an escape or avoidance response. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or MDR, is the exposure-based therapy sometimes used to treat PTSD. Therapies based on operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is the learning process which the strength of a behavior is modified by reward or punishment. Such therapies as modeling, reinforcement, and extinction. Modeling is learning through the observation and imitation of a model. Participant modeling is when the model demonstrates the desired behavior in a step-by-step, gradual process. The client is then asked to demonstrate the desired behavior in the same step-by-step manner. Reinforcement is the strengthening of a response by following it with some pleasurable consequence or positive reinforcement, or the removal of an unpleasant stimulus, which is a negative reinforcement. These can provide treatment for people with behavioral problems. Token economy. Tokens can be traded for food, candy, treats, or special privileges. Clients can earn tokens by behaving correctly or accomplishing goals. They can also lose them for bad behavior. Contingency contract is a formal agreement between a therapist and client in which both parties' responsibilities and goals are clearly stated. And extinction is the removal of a reinforcer to reduce the frequency of a particular response. Operant extinction involves removing one's attention from the person when they are engaging in an inappropriate or undesired behavior. With children, the removal of attention may be a form of a timeout, when the child is removed from the situation that provides reinforcement. The end. Thank you for watching.